Hey, so last week we talked about saturation. And so just to refocus that span of control, a quick recap is that one, you're going to every day do three things that you're going to accomplish and no more than that. You're going to do a checklist for your target goals. And then you're going to be able to task shed, which means eliminate things that aren't necessarily necessary. And then three, you're going to work on in communication, which is increasing your just communication with your sphere, whether it's your team, your family, or maybe all of the above. Um, and that will just help you refocus and have some support in what you're going through. All right. So now we're going to get to what's called task switching. So, here's what it is. Task switching, you basically have to discern what matters less because you cannot do it all. Like we want to do it all, and that is something that will always arise, but we have to learn how to discern the things in the seasons we are in. If we don't, then we end up in a high amount of task saturation. I'm going to say that word right today. And that will basically clothesline us, and we won't feel like we're getting any forward momentum. So here's a couple things. Multitasking is a lie. It's actually task switching. So your brain cannot do multiple things at once, but what it will do is toggle. You ever seen like a light switch that goes on and off real fast? That's basically what's happening in your brain when you try to multitask. Is your brain is switching so fast in between things, and it actually initiates when you're multitasking a lot your stress response. So it kicks in your adrenals, it kicks in cortisol levels and different things. Thank the Lord for the pink drink because that will help us when we're trying to multitask. And so you might try to task switch like two or three things that really feel like they matter. And being a mom, that definitely is going to happen because you're trying to do something and then someone falls or something gets knocked over, something happens. So what we need to understand is that those things are in our uncontrollable. If we are task switching within our controllable sphere, then it's actually going to start costing us. And so it basically just eats up time for each switch. It slows us down. It can even derail our mental progress forward up to a half hour. So I'm going to give you some statistics that she had in the book that were really good. So the things it affects is mental health, your quality of life, lost time, productivity, physical health, and sometimes even safety. You have chronic stress that's starting to kick in when you multitask. It can affect your teammates. It can affect your home life. It can affect your spiritual life. So many, even your relationship with the Lord. It can affect so many things. And so she says that a 30-second, let's say you're cooking dinner, a 30-second text just cost you 30 seconds plus 30 minutes. I was like, dang. So if I just stayed focused on cooking, and then when I had the time later to engage in texting, I would actually become faster and more productive. Have you guys ever done that? You're like trying to do other things while you're cooking, like, but serious, like engaging mental activities while you're trying to cook. I timed myself the other night. It took me twice as long to cook when I was trying to do multiple other things and get some messages in here. Y'all, twice as long. No wonder my kids get cranky and then we have harder nights. And I started to notice this pattern. I was like, okay, we'll not be texting during dinner. So I just blocked off that time and put it to a time that worked better. And so what happens, one of the main things she was talking about is your mental health. It really starts a cascade effect of negative emotions and higher stress. So again, it's initiating your HPA axis. It actually hits your short-term memory when you try to multitask. You start getting stressed out and your short-term memory decreases, your ability to hold information in your brain. And then if you ever notice, like if you're trying to multitask, something comes in, an uncontrollable comes in while you're multitasking, you maybe not everyone feels this way, but you have where like these negative thoughts start to creep in and then they start to become a snowball. And then the snowball starts rolling down the hill of like, oh my goodness, I can never do this. My kids are always this. And there's their extreme statements typically. This is never going to work. This always happens. I can't be a mom and do this. I can't, all those things. So if you have a negative thought process, you, hold on. If you have you are in the okay. You are basically in the process of changing what's going on in it, you're going to have to slow down what you're doing in order to speed up to stop that negative mental tape from initiating. That negative space slows us down or literally stops us. So we have to recognize if we're task switching, that we then are potentially engaging in triggering negative mindsets. So it's going to take, like we've been doing all this mental work, it's going to pull unintentional thoughts forward, which we have the thought models, the unintentional and the intentional, and I highly recommend using those when that happens. But it will basically, it slows you down so much that then you feel like you didn't accomplish anything, and it just backs up what your brain is telling you. See, it never works. We don't want that. So people who switch activities on average in 2004, 3 minutes and 5 seconds. That's how often they switch activities. So, and listen, if you're a mom, it's inevitable. Well, not inevitable. I'm not gonna use that word, but it happens a lot. You go to take a shower, and what happens? Someone calls your name. Someone comes to the door. Things you just can't control, and you're like, I was really waiting for that shower. So what you do is I want you to sit down, and you're just going to have notes where you can write out when different thoughts pop up, so you can actually start seeing how they are affecting you and slowing you down. So if you just recognize those thought patterns, so you can work through the intentional and unintentional thought model, it's going to be super helpful. All right. So in 2006, they did the same study. The 3 minutes and 5 seconds went to 40 seconds. So she broke down the numbers from a 9 to 5 job. That is 270 toggles from 9 to 5. Like if someone's working, because they're literally switching every 40 seconds. And so this basically pits like the work you're trying to do against yourself. It's basically playing volleyball in your mind, a really fast game, or maybe ping pong, where it's like bouncing back and forth. So switching focus, it often doesn't allow deep thinking. Anyone have trouble with deep thinking? Which is deep thinking is time for careful reflection. Creative problem solving, it doesn't allow for that. It actually causes your IQ to drop. It's basically the equivalent to missing a night's sleep, IQ drop. And it affects your ability to ask and hear from the Lord when you're switching so quickly. When we dilute our focus, we dilute our power. This one, that statement was very powerful to me of I have been allowing my focus and my power to be diluted. And so what happens when we dilute our focus, we dilute our power, we, one, revert to bad habits. We actually become less resilient. We get stuck, throw our hands up. We miss out on important moments because we can't engage in life. Anyone else been there? I have. We make mistakes more often, actually, when our focus is diluted. We weaken our ability to remember. So heavy task switching leads to underperforming the task you're actually working on, especially if it involves any memory. And then it affects your ability for a sustained attention. Have you guys ever gotten to go, you're going to go do messages, and you're like, I'm going to do this amount of many new reach outs or follow-ups. And then you have something dings or something, a name triggers something. You're like, oh, I forgot to message this person and this. And oh, that's right. I have this appointment later this week for this. And da 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 da. Y'all, happened to me. I felt like a ping pong was bouncing through my head yesterday. And I just put a piece of paper and started writing down names and stuff to trigger my memory later, and then just went back and focused. Whew, but that took some work. So just know it's a process, and it'll be a developed habit that you have in staying focused, just continually bringing back in, almost like a laser. All right. So when you have all those things happen, guess what that leads to? Overwhelm. So a couple things we're going to talk about, just applications that you can do is, and I talked a little bit about this off the Zoom last week, is hacking the clock. So when you get panicked, time compresses. You feel like time is out of control, you make bad decisions. And so basically we need a realistic gauge on how much time is actually passing. So when you hack the clock, it provides an automated physical reaction to crisis, and it actually reasserts a sense of self-control. Number two, it's going to trigger your memory of checklists or an action step to take, whether that's like pray or whatever your action step you want to be. This is going to take a little bit of time of just sitting down and thinking of what you want that action step to be if you feel like you lose control. But I highly recommend it. It's been very interesting with my kids doing that and actually teaching them how to do that so they can feel like they gain a sense of control over situations that they might not feel like they have control over. So this method will actually slow you down. You take stock. So it's going to feel slow down. So if people don't like to slow down, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. You're going to take stock, and it helps you not let the new level of chaos throw you off. You're going to note the time. And here's the thing, this slowdown can possibly be for a period of hours or even days. And so what you're going to do during this time is it's going to help you have a more realistic perspective and manage fear. Because remember, if you learn to overcome fear, you become unstoppable. You're going to look back at your top 3 priorities. You're going to have an emergency checklist for if anything happens. And then you can ask the question and figure out what is the most pressing priority, whether it's for family, your business, your team, holiday season coming up, maybe you can't fit it all in. So you take a moment to you're gathering information, you're determining the scope of the problem, you're going to observe, listen, and ask questions. Okay, so let's say we have something happen in the family, and things don't go quite the way on Thanksgiving. So what you do is you have to actually slow down. You're going to have to maybe take something off the table to be able to gather as a family unit, talk about it if that's a space and a place you can. Or maybe you have to take some time by yourself and gather information, think about it, see who you're going to talk to process and work through it. So remember, task switching and task saturation are the number one killers of successfully executing your goals. The number one. So the more aware we are of this, and the more we acknowledge that it's a threat and understand the why we fall prey to it, then we can take steps to mitigate it. And that why can be deeper. Like, why do we feel like we have to multitask? What are the things driving the need to feel like we multitask or task switch? Or why do we feel like we need to be doing so many things? Definitely go through and ask yourself the why and dig a little deeper and ask the Lord to reveal the root of what is going on. What is driving you to make you feel like you can't make the change or you can't stop doing something. So the second thing, we have hack the clock, and literally it's a stopwatch. Y'all, just click the stopwatch on your phone, or if we have a couple around the house, and that's how you hack the clock, and it'll give you just a perspective. So the bucket, this will help you navigate wrong task priorities. So it's going to give you a visual ID of acceptable tasks for your brain to complete in times of peak stress and overwhelm. Okay. So this is something when you're in high stress and you're feeling overwhelmed, you're going to execute this. All right. Hopefully this isn't the best drawing. Let me see if I can find it in her book. 1 second. So what you're going to do is you're going to find your primary task, which is your first in and your last out. Oh, here it is. Okay. If you don't have the book, this is what it looks like. Okay. It says your bucket. First one in is always the last out. So we are going to, this will help you ID when task saturation is happening. Whew, I need an extra pink drink this morning, y'all. All right, what to prioritize so you don't crash and burn. Has anyone ever felt like they crashed and burned? I know I have. And I'm like, man, it really stinks having to get up from the ashes. So this will help keep that from happening when used correctly. All right, so as task loading increases, you'll need to task shred what is less critical. For instance, my girls started American Heritage Girls. I'm a natural leader. They needed help. It was our first year. It's our first year being in there. And the lady was like, can you sign up and be a leader, like a leader with certain responsibilities for our group? And I sent her just a very real email and said, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But right now, me being the main provider for our family and just this being our first year, I literally cannot navigate adding something new. And so I said, I am willing to help with certain things, but I can't take a place in leadership for the girls, but I'll always be a helping hand. And she was like, oh, I totally get that. So guess what? Now I'm not in the emails when she's asking people to do different things. She knows where I stand. And I said, let's revisit this next year and see if I'm at a place that I can enter in and do something like that. And so it's just understanding that you're going to have those conversations because people will see us as leaders. Everyone needs help with something. And just so if it doesn't fit into your top 3, you then have to figure out how to communicate clearly to the people that are requesting that of you, of not now, maybe at this time. Or if you don't want to do it at all, be like, that is not something I really want to do. And people appreciate honesty. All right, so overtasking cues, there's a physical and psychological stress. So you have the cues are momentary indecision or confusion. You have wasted moments of activity, scrolling anyone, erratic or inconsistent work, loss of or late or non-standard verbal response. I actually see this happen with my kids in homeschooling. Like their brain needs what we call a brain break. And so they can't articulate anymore. Me working through information intake. And so I started to recognize that and help them articulate it and move forward. So missed tasks, loss of overall situational awareness. That is really important because then we miss things and then we have regret and shame come in when, things like the overwhelm have us miss things that are really important. Maybe we feel like with our family or our kids. And so this will help mitigate that. So the enemy isn't able to use those pieces against us. So with experience, this will become more comfortable and more easy to recognize task overload. This is what's within your span of control. All right, so bucket, you have one, most important, these go in first. 2, not as important. 3, nice to have, but not 100% necessary. So if you're, for instance, like my health was tanking, I was the main financial provider. So I felt like actually family and work competed against each other, but they were the top 2 priorities. It was a very interesting season. So I had to dig into those priorities and figure out what was necessary. Like, for instance, I had to prioritize certain calls because I only had a certain amount of energy that I could do. I communicated to Michelle. I literally, my brain wasn't working to do coaching calls. So she was amazing and stepped up in that. And so to my husband, I had to tell him, like, I would love to pick up the toys and stuff, but literally I get a headache every time I bend over. He didn't know that until I told him. He didn't know it hurt to walk up and down the stairs. And so if I wasn't willing to go get something, I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was just like really in pain. So just making sure you're communicating those things. So we have to understand our limitations. There's these studies she has in the book that 7 plus or minus 2. That is actually the amount of information you can hold in your head at one time. And it's really too simplistic to say that task switching is bad, because there's like you need to do it in certain areas. But we need to recognize our limitations and that we can only hold those 7 pieces of information. And so just recognizing all these different things, it helps us ditch the patterns that keep us stuck in default. Because default's so much easier. There's no resistance. We already have those neural paths in our brain. But now what we're doing is we're rewiring. You guys ever tried to throw left-handed or your non-dominant hand? It takes constant repetition to be able to get it to feel normal. And so that's what this is going to do, because we don't want to stay stuck in default instead of design. So that one was really, I love that, default versus design. All right, so some questions I'm going to ask you and then we can wrap it up, is I want you to write down, what are the things that often come up and distract you? And these can be good things. Our kids are good things. Sometimes a phone call from an old friend is a good thing. So you list these out to become aware of them. And that will help you to know how to navigate and actually have a game plan in moving forward. Number 2 is, what are the most important things you need to get done this week? And you can have a time during the week, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, Friday, who knows, maybe the middle of the week's a better time to reflect and figure that out. You're going to try to group, basically list out everything. You're going to try to group them into 3 to 4 categories, and then only focus on those 3 to 4 things each day. So it's almost like you're making a game plan for the week, and then you just keep that game plan in front of you for the week. And then number 3 is, what goes on your don't do list? This one I like. These are the things you want to stop doing. You want to know what's funny is I was really good at eliminating things that people were asking me or additional things into our schedule, because a busy schedule was not serving me in that time, and still doesn't right now. But one thing I didn't recognize was the mindset stuff, like worrying over my business. I didn't realize that I could put that on a don't do list. Worrying about my kids. Instead of worrying, why am I not praying? So much lost time when I could have been praying instead of just worrying about things. And so I'm going to go over real quick. So number 1 is, what are the things that often come up and distract you? Number 2, what are the most important things you need to get done this week? And you're going to put them into categories. Number 3, what goes on your don't do list? Awesome. And if you guys want to, you can send those in a message to me. I'd love to see them if you have them written down. And then we'll take off the next 2 weeks and start the first week in December. And we're going to talk about burnout. Has anyone ever felt burnout? Yeah. Just raise your hand so I can see. Yeah. Okay. All right. We will talk about that in 2 weeks. All right. Let me stop this. Hold on.